So we have a special guest in the studio today.
We do. I feel like I need to hold him like Dr. Evil.
It's a small, furry creature.
So a couple of episodes ago for Kansas 250 with Rosa, she talked about Quinn, the buffalo that you can purchase. And the idea is you travel with Quinn around Kansas and you take pictures and you post and then tag Kansas 250 or 250 America, Kansas as his nice little bandana states. But yeah, so
Yeah, we have
have we determined if it's a buffalo or a bison? Because there is a difference.
American bison. American bison. But we all say buffalo.
But we all say buffalo.
Because that's where the buffalo roam,
Yeah.
So for our listeners who can't see what we're talking about, yeah, this thing fits in the palm of Sydney's hand, just barely.
Barely.
But it's pretty adorable.
It's
Has
pretty cute.
a nice little t-shirt kind of tied over his back.
So Tanner will be traveling with him all year round. So keep an eye out on our story, on our socials, and you will see Mr. Quinn. Because of this sequincentennial. Is that right?
Sequicentennial.
Sequincentennial. Oh, so close.
Sequicentennial.
Sure.
Welcome to Ask a Kansan,
A podcast where we're amplifying, connecting, and uncovering stories across Kansas.
and today we have Andres Mata joining us.
Yes.
Andres is a Salina native and has been active from an incredibly early age and just trying to make his community better.
And he is the CEO of the Kansas Civic Network, something that he started also at a very young age. And we'll have him introduce that. But the conversation does go longer than kind of some previous ones, but for like a very good reason. And so please stick around for it. It is a really conversation. We touch on a lot of kind of really good kind of key messages is what I'll call it. So without any further ado, here is our conversation with Andres. Come on in. Welcome to the hot seat.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Get comfy here. There you go. Well, I'm Sydney. This is Gus.
Hello.
Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, so my name's Andreas Mata. I live here in Salina. I spent nearly 20 years of my life making sure Kansans have an opportunity to shine and to excel.
Which says a lot. You say 20 years. You're still very young.
Yeah. I'm 27.
Yeah. Can you kind of start with kind of how your passion grew and what kind of got the Civic Network kind of started? Can you speak to kind of your early childhood or high school of how you got kind of into...
I'm doing the math. 27 minus 20.
Like 7 years old. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, it was actually 18 years ago.
Yeah.
First, my family immigrated from Mexico to Kansas. And we were always instilled as a youth to really, to help. If you're in a position to help someone, do it. That's what really inspired that tract for me. But really, it was really at Schilling Elementary School here in Salina when my fourth grade teacher really bonded over politics. Throughout those experiences is really making sure, my passion for rural Kansas and the last 18 years has really been really interesting and fascinating to get those connections. All my experiences have built up this Kansas Civic Network. We're celebrating our 6th year this year in existence. And so, all that, a lot of folks, a lot of places throughout Kansas that really, make up the puzzle pieces of the Kansas Civic Network.
Can you tell our audience what the Kansas Civic Network is?
Yeah, so what we are is an organization started 6 years ago. And what we do is at the core is we promote and connect people and ideas and communities because we value not only the human capital aspect, but also that everyone has an idea that really, there's a lot of reasons why ideas, pick up a lot of steam, but then dissipate, and so we try to really nurture that electricity and create light bulbs because we strongly believe that the resources already exist. It's just matching everyone together.
Can you give us an idea of like any programs specific that you've helped or any stories that have come out of your time there?
Yeah. So our first project ever that we launched was a food insecurity report on the campus of Bethany College. Ended up graduating from there. And so in the timing, my mom always says, God has a plan, and we kind of just adjust to it. And so, I've always wanted to start an organization centered around civic engagement since I was like in 8th grade. And so, but through the experiences, on the report, what we found was, 12 years ago, and mind you, this is February 2020. So again, timing is everything. 12 years prior, there's been projects and programs and a lot of people trying to solve the issue, food insecurity in Lindsborg, Kansas. And, I was a junior. I transferred into Bethany. So I was probably a junior or senior at the time. And what we found was 1/3 of our students were food insecure. And 1/4 of our staff and faculty were at one point in their lives or currently on food assistant programs. And here is Bethany College, or Lindsborg overall. And so that was the ignition that restarted those conversations up. And eventually, those conversations, and I like to say that, we're not the drivers of the things that we accomplish. It's a team effort. In this project and all our projects, we're basically third row, of the car. Lindsborg, like any small town here in Kansas, is known for a strong church community, civic engagement. And at the time, Pastor Amy at the Messiah Lutheran Church was trying to solve the issue. And at the time, I reached out to my then professor of history, Tash Smith, and I said, hey, how do we do this? So let's do a survey, let's do it. And, that came out of the results. And, fast forward to May of 2020, because of our efforts, what they ended up doing was the first food pantry in the city of Lindsborg in its history.
I guess I never realized that Lindsborg didn't have that. So that's fascinating.
Yeah. And, it's all about, recognizing that, because in our conversations, whenever we do a project or a program, we don't want to redo the wheel. We want to add value to that. And so what we did is we looked back through 12 years and talked to, in a college campus, there's a lot of turnover, but thankfully there were still some folks that remember, 2008 and what that looked like throughout those years. And so we went back and said, why did this, this great idea for 12 years, it even went up to the staff senate of the college. And so we said, we talked to those folks and like, how do we do this? And data tells a story, and especially in rural towns, you don't see that visual challenge. And whereas in larger communities, the need is visible. Whereas, if you don't see it, it doesn't exist kind of mantra. And so, we're fortunate to play a small piece in that, and it's still active today. It's called the Dalla Pantry, and in homage to Lindsborg and its Swedish heritage.
I think it's always fascinating to learn how people, they get energized about something, they start doing it. And there's a lot of projects like that's just a one-off thing, and then everybody moves on with their lives and it's over. And that's not what happened in your case. This was the start of something bigger. So can you kind of connect the dots? How did the Civic Network grow out of those roots?
Yeah. So essentially, we we're really unorthodox method and approach. What we did is partly because of my experience. I was, like you said, raised here in Salina. I was 13 when I got appointed to serve on the city Human Relations Commission. Did that for 3 years, and then decided, like any politician, when trying to start a new chapter, to call a family meeting. And so that's what I did. And I sat everyone down. It's like, what's our next move? Because at the time, Salina was having the initial conversations of what the next 20 and 25 years is going to look like. I was working at Rib Crib in Salina. It's now closed, unfortunately. But I remember Mayor John Blanchard coming in, and, I was the host, and I said, how many, all that. And as I was walking him to his table, he goes, by the way, Andreas, did you know your term is about up on the Human Relations Commission? I go, well, I'm trying to seat you right now. let me talk. And he goes, have you looked at the Planning Commission? I said, I have no clue what that is. And ended up researching and, found that the Planning Commission has a lot of influence in the community. And so had the family meeting and had that conversation, and we ended up deciding that the Planning Commission was going to be the next move for me. And, it's all about, I think goes to what the core of, who we are is believing in something even though you don't see it. As long as you have the vision, how you get there is, it's second point, and so, I remember people were calling, saying in the community, oh, Andreas, you're nuts. You're crazy. How can you believe our downtown could look like this? And here we are 10 years later, one of the best downtowns in the Midwest. And so because of those experiences, we carried, when we start a partnership, we usually reach out to the city council or the mayor or city managers here throughout the state and say, what's the challenge you've been facing or dealing with, and where can we add value? I think that's really what's important for our work. And what sets us unique is that we're young. We're a bunch of doers that want to get stuff done. Our unofficial slogan is "We just do it," kind of like Nike, because for some reason or another, those challenges that our communities have faced, especially in rural Kansas, we realized that there's a lot of reasons why things kind of dissipate, as I said earlier, but we try to remove remove ourselves and those emotions and just focus, is this better for our community and for our state as a whole?
You say that that you guys are a bunch of doers. I went through your team page and you have a lot of amazing, very talented doers on your team. How have you been able to source all that great talent? And how do you guys work together?
Yeah, and it goes to who we are as an organization. It's so unique. Mm-hmm. I remember, in high school, I did debate and forensics. Then also did Boys State. And so majority on those folks on the team I've known over the last 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And so again, going to that building block, I knew that I wanted to start an organization, and I also knew who I wanted to be a part of the organization. About 90% of I've known in the last 10 years or so. And then the other remaining 10%, so Bethany at the time was rolling out a strategic plan called Pathways, Your Path, something like that. Yep. Pretty much going through the vocation, as a college and saying, how do we add value to your education or path to your purpose? That's what it was. And the career director there approached me and said, hey, Andres, I want you to be a part of this. And I said, well, I'm still a student, He goes, oh, no, we want you as an employer or, to offer internships. And I was like, okay. So I thought it was just another Bethany initiative. Well, the more I played around with the site, it's called Handshake.
Yeah.
And I realized, wait a minute, I have access to the whole nation.
Yep.
And so that's really been remarkable. And so year to date, we've had over I want to say 7 states represented. It first started out with, Kansas, Missouri, but now we have one team member at TCU, another at Baylor University, another at Michigan State. And, and these are, one just graduated from Baylor, but she's passionate about rural medicine.
Oh, yeah.
And she's from California originally, went to school or graduate from Baylor, and hopes to be a primary care doctor. And when I ask, and we go through the interview process, I ask them, I tell them, like, hey, I'll be honest with you, or be honest with me. On the website, on Handshake, clearly says Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
What brought you to us? What made you say, I'm going to hit apply? And majority of the time they say, it's because I believe in the mission. Mm. And, again, we have folks from Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma, just a great batch of young people, of young students, young professionals in training. And, it's really been remarkable to hear their story too, but also connect them. I mean, majority of them tell them, like, I only driven through just to get to Colorado to ski, but some of them have never stepped foot in Kansas, but are contributing to the success of not only the organization, but also the state. And so it's been really remarkable and fascinating to go through that journey alongside with them. And so, first we started kind of as part of our onboarding. We tell them, we give them a kind of crash course on Kansas, catching up to speed, because, how can we, there's a lot, to learn, but we give them the crash course of, here's what Kansas is all about. Any questions, things like that.
This episode is sponsored by Renaissance Cafe. Serving Northern Italian cuisine prepared with a fresh, contemporary influence, the Renaissance Cafe is one of Kansas's favorite restaurants. Whether you're planning a romantic dinner date, a family celebration, or an intimate meal with friends, the Renaissance provides a unique dining experience with an old-world atmosphere. Open Thursday through Saturday evenings, the Renaissance Cafe is located just south of Salina in Assyria, Kansas. Visit renaissancecafeassyria.com to book your reservation today.
I noticed also on your people's page, there's someone with the same name as you. Are they related? They're in high school?
Yeah. My sister.
Your sister?
Yeah.
Okay. How has it been working with her as a sibling? Because I know that my brother and I would never be able to work together.
Yeah. It's been pretty cool because she also did debate and forensics. At the beginning, I was like, you got to do it. And then she's like, well, let me think about it. And so I kind of just let her be for a bit, but then found debate on her own at Sacred Heart. And that's kind of where we bonded over policy, and you just nerded out, of course, right, as one does. And, part of that. And so she's originally she's at KU. Originally wanted to be a pharmacist, but found her passion in chemical engineering.
Wow.
And so, I just stick to the gray, avoid math and science at all costs. But,
Preach.
Yeah. And so, what we found together is, I also have a brother, and he lives in Oklahoma, down in Edmond, and he's in the plumbing engineering sector too. And so, but my sister and my brother, they give me a hard time sometimes of how much I love Kansas. But I remember having a conversation with my sister. She goes, I want to go out, leave the state. And I said, get to travel, you get to know the state. And she goes, I think I'm going to stay here in Kansas. And I said, one down. But yeah, but we've connected over the Kansas Civic Network and through opportunities, when she was starting her pharmacy, got connected, through rural pharmacy and learning that way, just connecting it. And so, that kind of is a microcosm of what, how we create positions. We create positions by the individual in mind and saying, what are your gifts, your talents, and your passions? I remember we had one intern at K-State, and he did our public relations internship. And, as we were doing gearing up for the 2022 midterm election, all we do is we don't pick a team. That's not our role. But we want folks to be educated.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our meetings we were having as a team, we were talking about the election or about putting a voter guide, and he kept hearing like, hey, voter guide and who's running, what they're all about. And he goes, he called me up one day. He goes, "Hey, Andres, I heard we were talking about this. Is there any way I could participate in this or add and contribute?" I go, "Why not? You're asking to contribute. Why would I stop you from contributing, but also building your experience?"
Mm-hmm.
And so he put together our voter guide. We sent it out, published it on our website and social media. And about a week later, I get an email from the spouse of the then Lieutenant Governor.
Oh, wow.
And saying, "Thank you for putting this together for Kansas and things like that." And I showed our team, like, you just never know who's watching you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really cool experience for him, but for us too as an organization. So, all that is really, set up our young professionals because, 9 times out of 10, when you're coming into a position or internship, they're requiring 10 years, things like that.
Yeah, you started real young.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You got your years in real early.
Yeah. And so, I think that dismays a lot of young professionals. We call them young professionals in training because that's what they are, is how do we keep them in our state? But overall, going back to the original question, my sister and I, we bond over policy and things like that. And she's not too in depth as I am, but it's really cool to have her on the team.
How are you guys organized? Are you a nonprofit? Are you for profit? Or all of that? And also, are you all paid? Do you have other jobs? How does this work?
Yeah. Another unique thing about us is because, like I said, ever since I was started in public service, I was wanting to start an organization. And, I first put the first words on paper or first ideas on paper about 2017. And, it collected dust, of course, as it does. And what I ended up finding out was that, here's what's interesting is that my peers didn't get involved as much as I did or as I was. I didn't see them get involved in whether that be, activism or in the community and things like that, volunteering, until 2018 was when I first saw. I was like, finally, you guys get on board here, But it wasn't until I said, till 2020, early stages of the year, I said, I want to do something, so I went through a college tour. I call it a college tour because I went to 3 different colleges throughout my time, but I ended up graduating at Bethany. 2019 was really the year or that semester, fall semester. I said, I'm going to stay here more than one semester. And so it's going to be my home base. And so I went to my professor, Dr. Joyce Pigg, and I said, hey, I've had this idea for a long time and I'm a student here. So I want to use Bethany as kind of the driver of this. And she said, well, talk to Dr. Tash Smith. He's trying to think of, how to embed civic engagement in here. And so talk to him. And so that's where the idea came from for the survey. And then COVID hit, in between there. And so I was working at Sam's Club, and I had a lot of free time. So I said, this is now or never type of thing. And so we're all remote. We're all volunteer. I call it, we're basically a club of, these young doers in the community. And, we look at projects where we could add value, but also partnering. I subscribe to probably every newsletter under the sun. And so I know what's going on in Seward Community College or liberal. So I know where our areas are focused, really say, hey, this is what's going on in Great Bend. How can we help? Or how can we reach out and make those connections? and things like that. And so, the dream is to be one day a full 501c3. It's a process.
Yeah.
I like to say that each time we get around that conversation, we get distracted by a project.
That's a good.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a good problem to have, I guess.
You have some freedom in being more loosely organized than if you have to have a board and you have to have all of those things that comes with that 501c3 status that can sometimes distract from the actual mission, and I wanted to ask about that. You said earlier that your mission is something that's attracted people to you. What is your mission?
Yeah, our mission is to drive civic engagement and rural collaboration by connecting ideas, communities, and people. So, our secret sauce is that, we break down any complex or is perceived to be a complex issue. We break it down to where it's digestible. We get to the granular of point. So, for instance, food insecurity. That's a lot. That's a huge issue to tackle. But what can we do in a short term that will lead to the long term? And so, and that's where we decided, a survey on Google Forms is very basic, but look what we found from that survey, and through our partnerships or through my time at Bethany, there are conversations having in McPherson County that, Lindsborg is known, they have 1 million festivals throughout the year. The county overall was having issues or problems connecting volunteers or finding volunteers. And so we said, let's research this. So throughout conversations, we ended up finding out that folks from McPherson County are traveling to Hutchinson just to volunteer. And we say, wait a minute. There's 5 school districts in that county, about three or four higher ed institutions, and, a plethora of community anchors. You got the YMCA, Steps MC, all these community anchors, but yet there's a disconnect. So we partnered with some folks and said, hey, we'll do the research. We'll do the heavy lifting, right? And what we came to a conclusion is that McPherson County needs structure. People needing to volunteer can go one spot. People needing volunteers can go to one spot. And that out of that conversation came out from Lindsborg. It's called Lift Up Lindsborg. It's a program that partnered with Bethany College, and to paint houses for folks. It's kind of like a grant program. But that goes to the core of, we didn't do rocket, anything different. We just looked at an issue and said to the very core, and and we take a lot of pride in not only just investing our time, but working alongside city managers, with the folks that can change, have that power to change things. And so, and that, again, it wasn't really a fancy, we came up and said, you guys need structure. There's nothing, we didn't write a 100-page report saying, do this, and here's a chart on how to get there. We just do it. Again, we just do it. And it's because, of course, we want to add value to the project or initiative, but we truly want to invest and make the community, enhance the community.
Kansas Wesleyan is proud to be the educational crossroads of North Central Kansas. As a partner of Ask a Kansan, we share the desire to build our communities and to discover what makes our region special. Learn more about the power of AND at kwu.edu.
It strikes me that I'm finally starting to understand the term community organizer. I've heard that term before, but is it safe to say that communities have a lot of energy, but that energy is sometimes not aligned in a direction, and so that's your role as a community organizer, is to identify where things need to happen and then organize people towards that thing?
Yeah, I think overall our goal is to, because, think about McPherson County. They have the resources already exist. It's just of putting everyone in line, and saying, okay, here's because, what we found is, I used to say, and because of my experience, I used to say, as a planning commissioner, is this pothole in Magnolia? I don't care if you live on the northwest side. I don't care where you live. The longer that pothole sits, the overall community is affected. And regardless of where you live, regardless if you ever been to it or not, it has to be all hands on deck. And so that's the perspective we look at it and saying, and we don't try to, like the project that we did in Lindsborg at Bethany College, we promote it because, we think it's a very valuable piece of a report, but just that, not because we want to be fancy and be in everyone's faces. We don't take credit, we don't, and it's very basic. And so, what we found is communities have the electricity, they have the resources. But what we've often seen, and again, one of those reasons why, ideas fade is because, there's not another Mata in Lindsborg, or there's no Mata in Lindsborg. It doesn't faze me one bit. Understanding is like, here's an issue. How do we get this solved? And, rural communities have a lot of challenges and opportunities at the same time. What we lean into is the strengths of folks. And, we've heard from young professionals, especially in rural Kansas, rural America across the board, is part of the reasons why folks don't engage, why young folks don't engage the process is because the last name doesn't fit correctly, or, thankfully throughout my time, I had adults around me that supported me and say, instead of saying, hey, Andres, that's a great idea, hold on to it, or wait your turn, those things. And so, but that's not the case for everyone. And so what I found is throughout traveling Kansas is that, there's a lot of passion. People want to give back to the community one way or another, but have hit roadblocks. And so we step in and say, and that's why we go to the city councils and city managers, not because we need their approval depending on the topic, but we want their blessing. Because if we go into a community, saying, hey, we're the Kansas Civic Network, they're like, okay, cool. What do you want?
Yeah.
But if we say, hey, we partner with the city manager, okay, now you're, a little bit legitimate. And that's, I think, not often talked about in rural America and rural Kansas across the board, because, there's a perception, I tell my team, is like, it's been 6 years, act like it's day one. Because I think a lot of organizations create kind of like a perception that, oh, we've been established over 100 years, we're the authority. I had a mentor one time tell me, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So we pull up a chair and say, hey, this is our community too, it's our state too. Let's work together. I had one when we're trying to figure out kind of like what the right structure for McPherson County would be for volunteer. And so, none of us are, we're still in college at that point, so we're young professionals. And so we're doing research, and we ended up finding an organization that does similar to what we want to do. And so we set up a Zoom call and meeting and, and said, hey, trying to get an idea of what you're doing. That way we could, obviously we're not going to replicate it because, what worked for that county may not work for a county up the street. And at the end of it, the director goes, I just have one last question. I go, yeah. Are you going to take my job? I'm like, whoa, we're in the conversation that I say, I'm going to steal your program. But it's the competitive nature of nonprofits and community organizations. And doing that authority. And so that, kind of dismays a lot of folks because they're like, I'm just trying to do good in the community. I have 10 million barriers I have to go through that none of them, I've been going on for like 30 years or so. There's been established barriers, but, that's where a lot of light bulbs turn off because they're like, well, what's the point? If folks, we call them gatekeepers, aren't willing to engage or refusing to engage, well, we kind of create our own lane. And so that's where we go through our partnerships and starting that. Again, unique approach, and just because based on my experience.
What is your hope for Kansas and the Kansas Civic Network?
This started out as an experiment, because I wanted to see where I could be, because, prior to establishing the Kansas Civic Network, I worked as a policy advocate with the Mennonite Central Committee. And, all that experience was taking me to D.C. a lot. And, I'm kind of like where the sausage gets made kind of guy. And so I want, that really was exciting for me experience. And I told my parents, my family, I said, I have this thing that is kind of like my own live experiment. If this works, I'm staying in Kansas. If it doesn't, I'm packing my bags, nowhere in between, one way or another. And so here we are 6 years later. And in Kansas, there's a lot of challenges facing our communities. I think Wichita State put out a report a few years ago that said by 2070 or 2050, 76% of Kansas is going to live in 19 counties. And so think about that. So, and that doesn't just affect state government, it affects schools, hospitals. And so we have a lot of things that, we need to get into place. But at the same time, what's encouraging to me and my hope for Kansas is that Kansans realize that they have a voice too. And that you don't have to be famous or be elected to get a community or to do a project. Yesterday was 16 years ago when I approached my fourth grade teacher about doing a project at Chilton Elementary for Haiti. And because it was in 2010, Haiti suffered a devastating earthquake.
Yep.
And I came to her and said, hey, I saw this on the news. What can we do? And she said, grab a couple friends and let's do a fundraiser. And we did that for 2 weeks. They ended up raising $1,400 or $1,700 in just 2 weeks. Every other elementary school in Salina was doing that, but Blue Beacon was heading those projects. So they came to us and said, hey, we were the only student-led fundraiser.
Oh.
And Blue Beacon was like, hey, we'd like to match what you guys did. And so I ended up doing $3,400, all because of my teacher saying, grab a couple friends, let's do a fundraiser. Nothing abstract, nothing complex. It's just very simple. But overall, my hope for Kansas is to get in, be part of the conversation, because, I'm fortunate to be in a position where I've been supported by a lot of adults, my family, because, I joke with my brother a lot, and it's like, I can't believe we're losing people to Oklahoma. We have a lot, that's one of the things that keep me up at night is losing to Oklahoma. We have our resources right here. We just need to talk to one another and figure things out together.
I imagine for some of our listeners, this conversation might be creating a little bit of dissonance in their head. And that dissonance might be caused by an elephant in the room, which I'll label as politics. And, we try to keep the podcast from being too politically one way or the other. But but politics is a reality that we all have to face, and I'm sure you face all the time in the work that you do. I'm just curious, do you think of the work that you do as political? I guess one other just facet I want to point out. You said a little bit ago something about resources. And one of the best definitions of politics that I've heard is the allocation of scarce resources. So I want your reaction to that statement. And then, do you see your work as political?
I see our work as, a regular thing, not necessarily a label. Of course, some of the things that, like voting, is who we are as Americans. And a lot of folks have said, have given feedback on how nonpartisan we are. But of course, there's going to have feedback on like, hey, I wouldn't do this if I were you, or things like that. But overall, like for our voting, I tell my team, we tell our partners, what we care about is not who wins, but who's deciding the winner. Because, if you're eligible, if you're 18, if you're eligible and fit all the requirements, you're a voter. And, again, we don't pick a side. And, it goes back, and this is not because of what the Kansas Civic is. This is always who I've been as an individual. Like I said, when I was a planning commissioner, we had probably our hottest topic was closing down 4th Street. I had one high school social studies teacher give positive or negative feedback, great feedback, and things like that. But, if it's going to help the community, move the ball forward. And, like I said, goes back to the pothole connection and or example, doesn't matter. Again, Santa Fe, there's a pothole in the middle of Santa Fe. I don't care if you live on the new apartments by Menards. If you never go to downtown, it's going to get you one day or another, regardless of what party or what jersey you wear. And so, we see ourselves as kind of like the conduit of making those connections between, and it has to be a two-way street. At Bethany, I took a sociology course, and I ended up finding out I'm an institutionalist. I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, this is what I keep reading. I read the definition in the book. I was like, wait a minute. I think this speaks to me because we have to use our institutions. We have to. And a lot of our programs at the Kansas Civic Network is we connect people to the institutions, but also the institutions to the people. It has to be a two-way street, or else it's not going to work. That's why our communities are facing issues. We used to joke a lot when we were 18, 20 years old, saying, we figured it out. Why didn't the professionals figure it out? All it took was people saying, hey, sometimes I like to be asked. And when we provided feedback, when's the last time you pick up the phone and talk to someone? It goes, well, folks gave feedback like, well, I assumed they wanted to email or things like that. But again, assumption. And they said, no, Johnny down the street, right, said they want to be, because what we heard time and time again was, if I knew this was going on, I would have helped. But people aren't being asked. And so is that, again, we don't want to overcomplicate things. Is really the simple, having conversation or partnering with others, and that takes a lot of courage from our, not only elected officials, but also our professional, like city managers, to get a lot of, they deal with the public overall. But, I sent 30 cold emails when I was at Bethany to 30 city managers, and only one responded, and he was needing help doing community engagement in Great Bend. And that's all. And that's one more than we did what we had yesterday. So So, our work, in today's world is political, but I remind our team and our partners and whoever we come across is that, we have to do the best for Kansas, because Kansas is not growing any faster. Again, we're losing Oklahoma. Again, that's one thing that keep me up at night. Mm-hmm. We have to do the best for Kansas because, we're losing population. Our hospitals, we have about most in the nation ready for closure. And so, Gus, I want to throw it back to you. You said, if it's allowed.
Yeah, do it. This is my favorite part.
But, it's, I take your heart or your question to heart because, that's the core of what we do. But how would you respond to someone saying, if the roads we drive on are political?
In confronting the issues our community has, we should try to pitch a big tent and invite people into that tent to confront those issues. And I think there is a lot of action of individuals needed to make that happen. Like, it can't all just be a conversation, right? Action has to be paired with conversation. I think to your point about just pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Like, if we invite people to the conversation, they're more likely to show up than if we just assume that they know they're invited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a great point because, a lot of our organizations are wanting to give feedback, but it has to be an invitation. It has to be an activity, and, we tell our partners, if you do an activity in liberal Kansas, don't do at the city building, do at the school, do at the, and things like that. And so, also wanted to elaborate. Speaking of liberal, we did a project in Seward County, in Garden, and Dodge City. And this, I think, exemplifies the disconnect between institutions. And so we were approached by Greg Stevens, a good mentor of mine from the Salina Media Connection, and said, hey, I got a project for you that might fit within the Kansas Civic Network. And I said, okay, Greg, send it over. We'll take a look at it. And it was a USDA Department of Agriculture project. And the title was Transitioning to Organic Farming. Called them up and I said, Greg, none of us are farmers. What do you, this sounds great, but none of us are farmers, And he goes, no, read more into it. So that project was for, to do community seminars to provide education for Latino farmers in Southwest Kansas to transition to organic farming.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And so I said, okay, we'll do this, and we got training and all these things and went up doing the seminars and the information we were providing. And so, there might be breaking news here for some, but when you go to the store and it says organic, there's no guarantee that it's 100% organic, just based on the income of the farmer or the individual that sells that product. When you hit a certain threshold of income, I think it's 5,000, below 5,000 on income, there's no requirement to go through a certification process. Beyond that, if you go beyond that threshold, you have to go through a certification process. What I just shared was breaking news to the room. And rightfully so, they were, some were quiet, because they didn't want to voice their, unload their feedback onto me and to us. And I had individuals say, Andreas, I've been a farmer, fill in the blank. That's number one Kansan thing is I've been a fifth generation, individual, things like that. I've been farming my land and doing this, but the first time I'm hearing about this is from you. Think about that. We did the project because Greg convinced me. But had we not done the project, the gap would still exist.
Hmm.
And so think about, we're in Kansas, farming state. There's a lot of organizations. Not saying that they dropped the ball or anything. Or, again, going back to community anchors, whose job is it to educate everyone?
Hmm.
And, and it's like this, the same thing with the census. We focus on the boring things. But with the census, is every 10 years is we have to count everyone up. And based on that data is what our pie or slice of the pie comes from Washington. And so, we're about 30% accounted in Kansas. And for me, it shouldn't be my Catholic priest going door to door and making sure folks fill out. It should be, every superintendent, every director of Chamber of Commerce, every doctor, everyone, every city manager, include them too. But, I think we see a lot of saying, oh, that's not my role.
Mm-hmm.
We could have easily said, hey, we're not a farming organization. We're not the Farm Bureau.
Mm-hmm.
That's not our role. But we lean into it because we understand the value of making sure all boats rise with the same tide and making sure that Kansas, whether that be, folks in Southwest Kansas or young people throughout the state, is making sure that they have a voice and are seen through our work.
Well, I think that was a great place to kind of wrap up our conversation today. Thank you so much for taking time and, more importantly, for the work that you all are doing across the state. It's obviously having a huge impact on people near and far here inside of Kansas. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and huge fan.
Want to spread your organization's message across Kansas? Consider becoming a sponsor. Ask a Kansan has a unique focus on Kansas and its people. By sponsoring our podcast, your organization can reach people from Canarado to Kansas City, Wichita to Washington, and all the great places in between. We have a variety of sponsorship packages available to fit your budget and needs. For more information, visit askakansan.com/sponsorships or call us at 785-571-9507.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Andres. It was fascinating just to hear how we kind of got started with all of this.
Yeah. And the more we talked with him, the more I'm like, I really want to meet your family, because that's such an amazing thing to be able to say, you want to join a city meeting commission of any kind at the age of what? 13?
I think you said. Yeah.
Sure. Like at 13, I was binge watching Kim Possible and Lizzie McGuire. Like,
and that board of human relations.
Yes.
I believe they deal with like it's not an easy topics of conversation they talk about. And so he just dove right in. And yeah, I think that he sets a terrific example for young people of like, oh, you don't like something? Well, do something about it.
Yeah. It's so funny that this episode lands kind of where it is, like in my life, is just last week, Madeline, we pass by the City of McPherson city building every day, twice a day to go to daycare. And finally the other day she goes, what's that building? What is that? And I was like, well, it's a city building. And she goes, okay, well, what's that? And I go, like the mayor, like in Paw Patrol? She goes, oh yeah. I go, that's where the mayor works. Oh, can we go there? And I was like, yeah, I will go there. We will go there together. So I'll take her in the next couple of weeks, probably to a city commission meeting, and then show her around, because I used to work there. So I think I know one person maybe that still works there. They've had some turnover, but
nice.
Yeah. So it's just, it's introducing people to politics without putting the politics in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Politics brings up like this deep well of like, ugh,
yeah,
in
like
a lot of people.
Connotation, yeah.
And when you talk to people that are actually really working in a lot of these areas, I mean, they're more energized by it.
Yeah.
And it's less scary to them. I have my own little like tangent that I have to go on briefly.
Okay.
And that's like we think of federal government, we think of state government, we think of county government, we think of city government, right? We have these different levels. But we've kind of lost sight of townships.
Oh yeah.
that counties used to be divided into townships, and I don't know if they had much governance that happened.
Yeah.
But how many people in Kansas? If you live in Kansas, what township do you live in? I'm curious if you know.
I don't know. I don't even think I know.
Yeah.
Because it's how that's how you determine like where you're voting and who is your representative of your township of.
Okay, so I have a segment for you. Another episode of Who's at Kansan, your favorite.
My favorite
segment.
one.
Yeah. And this is kind of
community. We
community.
don't run out of Kansans.
Oh, there's millions. We'll be fine. So this is the community organizer edition.
Oh,
so
gosh.
Here's what I'm going to tell you.
This is a deep well.
You are guaranteed to get one right.
Okay, good. A lot of pressure if I don't.
So let's dive right in. This first person founded a movement from scratch. They were born into slavery in Tennessee in 1809. They escaped to freedom and later worked as a coffin maker in Nashville, which meant they saw firsthand the victims of racial violence during Reconstruction. Convinced Black Americans would never achieve equality in the South, they formed the Edgefield Real Estate and Homestead Association in 1874 and started scouting Kansas for Black settlements. They printed handbills reading, "Ho for Kansas!" By 1879, their organizing sparked a mass migration of 20,000 to 40,000 African Americans westward. They testified before the U.S. Senate in 1880 and earned the title Father of the Exodus. Any guesses? This is a deep cut, admittedly. Have you heard of the Exodusters?
No.
Okay, I'm not surprised. Like that's a term that some Kansans that might ring a bell.
Yeah.
But this is a part of Kansas history that we don't cover enough, so we need to. This is Benjamin Pap Singleton, who was the founder
I've heard of this guy.
The Exoduster movement. Yeah. Okay, so our second person. This person didn't found a movement, but created its most recognizable phrase, still used today. Let's see. A Congregationalist minister who arrived in Topeka in 1889, they wrote sermon stories as weekly cliffhangers. In 1896, one of these stories became a novel, asking a simple question about Christian moral decisions. A copyright error meant they earned almost nothing, but it sold millions worldwide. They walked the talk. In 1893, they established the first African-American kindergarten west of the Mississippi in Topeka's Tennessee town. In 1900, they edited the Topeka Daily Capital for 1 week, quote unquote, as Jesus would, and circulation exploded from 12,000 to 380,000. In the 1990s, youth groups turned this central question into bracelets. So can you either name the person or the movement?
The movement is probably What Would Jesus Do?
Yep. And
I have no idea the person.
So the person is Charles Sheldon. And the actual name of this movement.
Like Dr. Phil.
He does look like Dr. Phil. He looks exactly like Dr. Phil.
That is Dr. Phil.
Yeah. So the movement that and I mistakenly said he was the founder of the movement. He was one of many people that helped get it going. But was called the social gospel movement.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, doctor.
There's a lot of interesting. One of the things he did in his sermons was he would end them in cliffhangers. And he'd like build them up really big and then he'd end it. And then the whole congregation would sigh. And then they'd come back next week and that got the ball rolling kind of for him. Interesting guy. Okay. Person number 3.
Oh, I wonder who that could be.
This person didn't found temperance, but revolutionized its tactics. They moved to Medicine Lodge, Kansas in 1889 and started a local women's temperance union chapter. Kansas had banned alcohol in 1880, but saloons operated openly because officials looked the other way. In June 1900, they decided hymn singing wasn't enough, and they started physically destroying saloons, first with bricks and then with a signature weapon that became their trademark. They were arrested over 30 times and paid fines with lecture fees and souvenir sales. You probably know this person as...
I'm blanking on her name now that I would put on the spot, but...
okay, I'll
Carrie something, isn't it?
Yep, very good. Carrie Nation.
Carrie Nation.
Yep, and one of the members of the temperance movement.
Yeah.
And she invented these occurrences, I guess, called hatchetations, where she would destroy bars with hatchets. A Kansan through and through, right? All right, cruising on through to person number 4. This person didn't create populism, but became its most famous voice. Born to Irish immigrants in Pennsylvania, they came to Kansas as a schoolteacher in 1870. She failed at farming and eventually settled in Wichita. In 1885, they became one of the first women admitted to the Kansas Bar Association. By 1890, they were delivering over 160 speeches across Kansas and beyond. Their most quoted line, "Wall Street owns the country." A newspaper claimed that they told farmers to raise less corn and more hell. She denied it, but happily adopted the phrase. Supporters called them the People's Joan of Arc, and they became the first woman appointed president of a state board of charities, but eventually broke with the populace when the party refused to support women's suffrage.
I have no idea.
Totally fair. This is Mary Elizabeth Lease.
Oh.
Yeah, it's
There's
just another.
a lot of authority in those shoulders right there.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a dance she's doing or
I think it's more of a bring it.
bring it.
Bring it
She
on.
kind of has her hands out and
yeah,
open.
that's
It's
an
interesting look.
interesting
Very few pictures of these folks online, and
I would
so
assume, yeah.
yeah, but again, another person that I never heard of prior to researching for this. Okay, moving on to our last person. This person didn't create socialism, but built its most powerful American media platform from tiny Girard, Kansas. And I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. I think it's Girard. Girard. A newspaper publisher from Indiana, they launched a socialist paper in Kansas City in 1895 and then moved it to Girard in 1897, surrounded by coal mining communities full of immigrant workers. From that small town, their publication became the largest circulation socialist newspaper in American history. 550,000 weekly subscribers by 1910. Special editions reaching over 4 million copies. Contributors included Eugene Debs, Jack London, Mother Jones, and Helen Keller. This was the first newspaper to serialize Upton Sinclair's The Jungle in 1905. So, yeah. Who do you think this person is?
I have no idea.
Okay, this person is J.A. Wayland, and founded the newspaper The Appeal to Reason and was a member of the socialist movement.
Wow.
And I think, this little segment that we were just finishing does a great job of showing like this weird dichotomy that Kansas has. Like we're a very conservative place, but some very progressive things have come out of this state. And there's also an interesting kind of connection between faith. A lot of these people were driven by their faith to do the things that they did. So there's a lot to learn about community organizing in Kansas history. So that's who's that Kansan?
Brilliant. Well, we're at the end of another episode, so please make sure to like and subscribe and give us a review on whatever platform you are listening from.
Check out our website at askakansan.com where you can learn more about our newsletter, The Curious Kansan.
And we will see you next time.
Thanks.